And so we return and begin again. Welcome to the Invisible Podcast, Issuesode 23. My name is Bobbsy. We're going issue by issue, page by page, panel by panel, theory by theory, and woohoo by we're looking at the future through Grant Morrison's Cosmic Conspiracy classic, The Invisibles, and we're on to Issuesode 23. Oh, it's spooky. It's the spooky number 23 Issuesode. Now, quick lockdown report. Basically, today's kind of the last day of like full lockdown. I'm recording this at the end of March 2021. It's the long 2020 and it's infinite lockdown, but it's maybe coming to an end-ish now insofar as some shops and pubs are going to be open as of tomorrow, or people will be able to go and sit in each other's gardens or something. So yeah, far from full freedom now, let's be honest. But the vibe is in the land that's abroad is shifting somewhat. Death still very much present, and I mean that to yeah, everybody who's lost someone. This one goes out to you. Because I know there's a lot of us. We're going to try something a bit different this issue. Because I don't know if you can remember a couple of issuesodes ago, back in the January issuesode. I should have got the issue here to hand, but it's the Liverpool one. It's the Liverpool issue of the Invisibles, and it's the Liverpool issuesode podcast that we did at the end of January. At one point in that, I say something like these words. I say, I don't know why Liverpool is important to our current moment, meaning 2021. But I had an intuition that it was. Not like a free floating intuition, an intuition obviously filtered through the lens and the fact of the issue of the comic being read at that moment. And I'm like, so why am I thinking? So I spent a lot of time thinking about Liverpool. Didn't really know why. And obviously it was in relation to a lot of the things that we're talking about as being the themes of the Invisibles, both the themes of the mid-90s when it was being produced and of the way that those themes are reflecting and influencing and kind of just like showing up again in our current, in 2021, as I'm doing this big reread, right, once a month. Because, it's like, the Invisibles is magic, right? It's a charged object. It's a bit like a pack of tarot cards. It's got magic in it, and everything's got magic in it to a greater or less degree. The Invisibles is clearly to a great degree. And then this month, literally a week ago, so obviously the Liverpool stuff that I was talking about back then in January kind of had all of these resonances with, Geoffrey of Monmouth and Salomon's House and Cadwaller's, attempt to reconquest certain parts of southern England, and it really does feed into the macro theme that we've been kind of exploring, and that it's kind of like very, it's obvious why this is a kind of a live issue, is that the Invisibles has got this kind of strange resonance with one of the very large thing that's happened to the UK. It's about kind of like statecraft in general, or state creation in general through culture and magic, for want of a better word. But the Invisibles is kind of obviously in a way which I didn't really appreciate at the time, but it seems very clear now. It's about how states are built and maintained, and because the UK has just left the EU, and then you've got all this kind of plague stuff happening, not on the periphery, like very much as another layer of the roundel, with the invisible mystery at the heart of it. That there's something in the Invisibles which is about the way that the UK state is going to sort of reconstitute itself following Brexit, following COVID, that we might be able to think about. Now, so literally this week, there was a big old thing, and it's still ongoing, about Liverpool, and basically the Westminster government is going to suspend democracy in Liverpool under some kind of flimsy pretense of like local council corruption, to basically the city's going to be manned. The city's, which got a kind of a tradition and a long embedded system of local institutions for administrating democracy and local resources. It's all going to be managed from Westminster directly because, oh my goodness, this city council is corrupt. Now, I'm not so basically, London is exerting this its kind of latent power and turning it into not latent, but just like quite overt power. London, Westminster, is taking over Liverpool. Okay, so one of the things we're learning about through the Invisibles about the way the UK is currently constituted is that bits of it that are broken are gonna be under some auspices or to some degree, which may or may not be successful, like retake parts of Britain which are out of its nominal control. Um, um, and Liverpool, because it has its unique tradition of socialism, Catholicism, its highly unique antipathy towards the Murdoch media empire, and this kind of personal history of hatred for Boris Johnson and him having to eat shit on this kind of public shame walk there back in 2004 on Trafalgar Day. Liverpool is obviously in the sights of London, and it was flagged back in January that something was afoot. I had no idea what it was, and then it was revealed 2 months later, literally this week as I record this. So that's weird. The Invisibles can tell the future, right? Is where I'm going. And for ages during this reread, if you've been watching, it's been clear that it's live as an object and still kind of very much kind of entangled and enmeshed with reality as it continues to develop, right? I know that this all sounds mad, but it's just a bit of fun. Just go with me. But there's only so many times you can kind of go. You can kind of see these synchronicities or see these kind of resonant events and go, oh wow, that's weird. Oh my god, that's so weird. It's really blowing my mind. I'm a bit sick of it blowing. Actually, I'm not sick of it blowing my mind, but it's like the mind blowing bit is only takes you so far, right? And it's not very testable, I guess, is the problem, right? Is it alive and kind of at play and kind of reflecting and reflecting and refracting and influencing reality here in 2021, or am I just a bit over into it? Can we kind of test this a little bit, is my thinking. Can we apply some kind of framework whereby we could use the Invisibles, for instance, to make some predictions about the future, right? So, because it seems that in January, if I'd been a bit more smart, then we could have, with regard to this kind of London takeover of Liverpool. I'm not saying that the Liverpool Council isn't corrupt because it's local government. Hello, it being corrupt is the point of it. When you get to these like large civic bodies, especially in the larger municipal city areas where there's a reasonable amount of like public money sloshing around, the local council and the local bourgeoisie and the local organised crime and many other local entities are basically all just overlapping and tied together to try and get some of this money for themselves. I'm not saying that Liverpool Council isn't corrupt. I'm saying that all of them are corrupt. What is unusual is the fact that London has decided to notice how corrupt this one is and decided to suspend local democracy there, take away the rights of Liverpudlians to decide who rules them, in favour of fiat rule from far off in hated London, right? So just to get that clear, I'm not defending whatever the dodgy geezers of Liverpool might be up to. I'm just saying that it's interesting that it's Liverpool that's been singled out for reconquest, right? So anyway, yeah, testing. So what we can see is that there's like a 2-month lag, which kind of fits with like the cover dates. So we're looking at August 96 on the current issue, and these cover dates, because of like shipping times and because when they're commissioned, when they're printed, when they're finally distributed, and when they're finally bought and reach the hands of young impressionable comic book reading minds, there can often be like a 2-month lag there. So I might have got this in August 90. So this says August 96 in it. I might have bought this in, I can't really remember which way it goes, but either I could have easily bought this in October 96 or June 96. There's about 2 months slippage between where the cover date, between what the cover date says and when the comic actually kind of appears in the wild. And that 2 month lag appears to be working forwards at the moment. So basically, something that happened in the comic 2 months ago happened in reality just this month, just this week. So we're going to do a quick read through of this issue, and we're going to think about it and see if we can make some predictions. We're going to make a little bit of a list at the end of some semi-concrete predictions that I'm going to bet will happen 2 months hence, which would be at the end of May, or sort of, say the second half of May. We're going to look into here and see if there are any testable predictions that we can make that are a bit more concrete than Liverpool is involved. Although we'll get to this. No, actually, maybe we'll just say it now. So, okay, no, we'll get. So, also though, right? I've just got this funny feeling that we might need another method for testing the divinatory or prophetic capacities within the comic. So, this is issue 25 of Volume 1 of The Invisibles, and I've broken the rule, and I've read this because this is the issue that will be coming out in May when the predictions from this one will come true. So, but maybe this isn't the right way to think. Maybe just like picking up an issue and using it to look 2 months ahead maybe isn't the right way to do it. Maybe the right way to do it is to look 2 months ahead into the future and see if we can find the thing there, right? So do you get why I'm interested in this issue? I hope you do. So also, we're going to have a very quick kind of, not like a proper read through of this issue, but we're just going to go through, but I have had a read through of it, and we're just going to pick up a few points which we think might, we'll make a parallel list of predictions based upon what's in this issue, and we'll see if either of them make any sense at all. We'll see if one of them works better than the other. We're basically treating this comic book as if it was a pack of reading cards, right? And we're gonna lean into that and test a couple of methods to see what might be most effective, right? I think that sounds fun. I think that sounds fair. I don't think I sound too mad, but obviously a bit mad, and that's kind of where we need to be right at this moment in time. Is there anything I need to say before we jump in? I think that's about it. I'm gonna have another bit of coffee. It's a very cool Manic Street Preachers mug. For the heads out there, you'll recognise these words. It's not mine, it's my wife's. If she knew I was drinking out of her special mug. Oof. Okay. Pardon me. So we're on to issue 23. Woo! Things fall apart. Of The Invisibles, The Last Testament of Jack. We've got our Sean Phillips cover here. We've got Jack in this kind of like Christ-like halo pose. We've had a lot of like spiritual Jack covers lately. This is kind of the latest one. Pardon me. This cover kind of works as part of a triptych with some other issues. Yeah, we'll get to that when we do the final issue next month, the final issue of the 3, which will be the penultimate issue of this first book read through. And then I think we're going to pile straight into book 2. I don't think we're going to, otherwise I'll be a very old man by the time we finish this. We're going to pile straight into book 2 in June. I don't really like this cover. I think I'm getting pretty sick of these, like, Dane is the Buddha, even if it's like an alien Scouse Buddha kind of thing. Barbalith as his halo, obviously, and this kind of annoying heart punk t-shirt logo that he's got. I'm getting a bit bored of it. This also kind of isn't my favourite issue, but I think it is quite a good issue, and it's quite. I think it's quite a good issue, and kind of takes us in some quite interesting places. But I'm also going to rip through it. I think don't really want to spend too long on it because, well, stuff to do, frankly. Bow. So onto the front page, onto the inside advert, Saint of Killers. That's like a Preacher spin-off by Steve Pugh and Garth Ennis. I think it ties quite well in with the things of what we're talking about here, insofar as it's it's kind of to do with like the karmic bargain that King Mob has made. It's kind of to do with the baddie that we're kind of going to be confronting in this issue, and it's also a little bit of a in the next book of the Invisibles, the comic will become a bit more of a Western. It'll become a much more American, obviously. And also just that's a cool picture. It's a drawing, it's like art, by Steve Pugh, who's got a very pleasing. Is it Steve Pugh? Am I just saying that? Yeah, Steve Pugh. Oh no, that's the cover. So that's Glenn Fabry. Glenn Fabry, nice chap. Yeah, see, yeah, like badass cowboy and cowboys. And the line, he came back from perdition seeking vengeance and drowned the West in blood. So that's a pretty apocalyptic, isn't it? If we think of the West as not just being the Wild West, but as being the West, in terms of the Western European and Anglophone powers, and we open. I haven't chased this down. These are like the Liverpool docks, basically, aren't they? One of the most famous buildings in Liverpool. So we're in Liverpool again. So Liverpool is relevant this month too, but we are in Liverpool on December the 22nd, 2012 at 8 a.m. Now, as you'll all remember, that was the cosmic the December the 22nd, 2012 was the moment of cosmic convergence of the eschaton taking place, of the Mayan prophecies and the end of the fourth world, I think it was, coming true, all that malarkey. Do you remember that? Of course you do. It was nearly 10 years ago already. It was really good. Me and my sisters went up the tour in Glastonbury, and as you'd imagine, it was really going off there. There was a lot of true believers. It was great, and they had been praying at some water from the holy spring, and they'd been zapping it with vibes for weeks, according to what the dude who was like leading the ceremony up there was saying. And then everybody sort of got a dropper of it. We went and did that, and it was a right laugh. Lots of humming and like fun hippie vibes. It was really good. My lovely sisters who aren't that they're Glastonbury people, but they're not like they were by birth, obviously, same as me. But they are, or by upbringing anyway. They're not the hippie. They're not hippie people. They're not as weird as I am. But they were well into it. They're right laugh. It was really good. Dane is cradling this man here, in a very kind of like nice way. They're obviously like just on a rubbishy street somewhere. This guy's got ripped clothes. It's December. There are some raves being advertised on the walls. Techno cult, slow 90s flashback, the Cubes, music that doesn't come out of a test tube. A lot of the themes of like the inauthenticity of the 21st century and the kind of digital reproducibility of it and resistance or disavowal of that as being countercultural forms is right, but actually in 2012 people were still fairly sanguine about like the kind of the techno dystopia thing. It wasn't non-existent at this point, but it's really only happened in the past. I guess 2012 was actually the point where it did start to happen. Actually, it didn't really gather speed until 2016, I suppose. That was the point where the liberal intelligentsia like suddenly realised that like, oh no, the world that I thought we were going to have. Yeah, but they were always dicks. So oh look, it's snowing. It's snowing. Christmas never snows around Christmas. Not even up north. And so so this guy here who looks a lot like Dane. Let's be honest, this is Dane, but he's older Dane because it's 2012. So he would be 32, 32 by this point, same age as Jesus, which we'll get to. We know a bit. We find out when exactly and how old Dane is at this point in this issue. So he's kind of older. He's got quite nice hair. He's still very blonde, and this is another very blonde guy who's obviously close to him. Who knows Dane, and he says, "Oh, look, it's snowing," because there's kind of snowflakes, and you can't really see probably, but there are snowflakes around here. Snowflakes, bloody snowflakes. And Dane says that's not snowflakes, that's it starting. So obviously this is the eschaton, the ending of the old world and the birth of the new, beginning to happen in the form of these things that can be easily mistaken for snowflakes. And Dane's been telling this guy a story. Do you know who this guy is? I don't think it's revealed in the issue, so I won't tell you. But really, we have seen this guy in the comic before, and he's blonde, and he's from Liverpool, and he's friends with Dane, and it's very not difficult to work out who he is at all. But he is older. And it's nice to see him alive, but it's not nice to think about the life that he's had since we last saw him. So the end of the world is happening, Dane has gone there to be with this guy at the end of the world. And he's saying, and Dane is telling him a story. Basically, he's telling him the story of what's going on within the current timeline of the issue, right? Basically, the confrontation. Okay, we were in the trick shop, and as is Dane's words, we were in the trick shop, and the little alien machines were turning it into a copy of where they came from, their own dimension. Over the page, we're there. We're back in Alan Dunn's House of Fun, which sounds like a Viz comic strip now, doesn't it? Now that you think about it, I don't know who Alan Dunn is, and I don't think it's terribly important. But the fact that he's got a House of Fun is creepy. Mr. Six and Boy are still sort of like they've got this big dimensional abscess, which Dane describes as a sort of a hole into a different universe. Speaking of abscesses, right, and about like the Invisibles having resonances with real life, and all of Mr. Six's, not Mr. Six's, King Mob's kind of like facial disfigurement problems that he's had over the past couple of days. I've got a horrible spot that isn't going. And I'm bold and sexy too, right? So that's weird. That's another kind of overlap. So I apologise for my unsightly facial disfigurement, and I'm pretty sure it's not because of bacterial facial. Well, obviously, it is a bit of a bacterial facial infection, but I haven't been eating my greens as much in lockdown. As simple as that, really. And I need to. So my skin's a bit horrible, and I do apologise if you can see this honking great stinker on my face. But whatever, you'll get over it. Mr. Boy and Mr. Six are kind of panicking about this abscess. Mr. Six sits down in the lotus position because he's a hyper chill dude, and then he does this cool thing where his eyeballs kind of come out on green slime strings when he sits down to meditate, and his eyeballs kind of like fly through Alan Dunn's House of Fun, and he kind of sees what's going on. And there's kind of for the first time, not necessarily for the first time, but there's kind of for the first time, these eyes and their seeingness open up the comic to this kind of conception of who the viewer, it's just meta, basically. It's just like who's reading the story, who's telling the story, and within the kind of the narrative itself, and these captions that we get describing the events that are going on. Obviously, we know this is Dane happening. Obviously, we know on some level that there are some storytellers like Grant Morrison and the other people who are drawing and producing the comic. But this is like the eye, right? This is like the thing that sees these events. So these eyes are kind of like me and you as the readers of the comic, and they're kind of like Mr. Six because he's hyper meta and ascended, as we keep being told, and it kind of introduces a kind of a theme. It's basically just one of those postmodernism themes, which will be kind of, if I think I'm right in saying, will be explored much more in the next book of the comic, in book 2, about like the identities of the readers and of the creators, and how these things might overlap within and kind of then like telescoping out of the in the comic reality, right? And it's a useful way of like thinking about the weird overlaps that the comic might have with with like our world in terms of like disgusting facial disfigurements and being able to tell the future with the comic 30 years on, 25 years on, whatever we are now, and that kind of thing, right? This is kind of these cool floating eyes. I mean, it's a great visual. This cool floating eyes sort of begin to provide like an emanation from within the comic of like, oh, there are other perspectives kind of stacked up here beginning to work. I think if you kind of obviously this, as I've said a couple of times, and we haven't got to yet, and we're not going to get into it this issue either. It's next issue. This is when Grant Morrison himself started to notice that the comic was kind of overlapping with his life in a way which is a little bit difficult to explain. And I think these eyes and this kind of notion of reading and seeing and the kind of the creation, like the co-production that this looking process signifies within the way that the comic is kind of affecting the world, starts to happen here, right? This is the comic starting to go, and the writer of the comic indeed starting to go, I think there's something weird here. These floating eyes aren't a bad symbol for what that process of my beginning to realize that process is occurring, right? He's beginning to see it, and he's beginning to see it because he's got slime stringy eyes, which is cool. Robin and Crow are fighting zombies and deactivating the magical booby traps. Jim is enjoying the irony of zombies being sent to kill him because zombies is kind of his territory. He is kind of the zombie guy. And Mr. Six is sitting down and doing this, not just to see what's going on, but obviously to be able to direct his power to Jack. He says, if I can find Jack before they do, I can help him fight. And Boy says, fight what? Jack can't fight. What's he going to do? Swear them into submission? There's a lost one in the building. The entire environment is becoming... We know about the lost ones, thanks to Sam Beckett, remember? There's a lost one in the building. The entire environment is becoming toxic. Stay close to me unless you want cancer. So Mr. Six is so vibey that he can just stop these nanomachines from getting near him, whatever. And also kind of a little bit of his like aura is protective enough to stop them from getting Boy as well. Yeah, yeah, we're just having a little recap of the scenery as it's going on. So we've got Mr. Six and Boy, we've got Robin and Crow, and we've also got King Mob and Fanny who are in the torture room with Sir Miles and Bum. Miss Dwyer is kind of coming for them as well, right? And some others go, King Mob is dead. Did you really believe it could any other way that your lunatic crusade could succeed? They'll tear you apart. Miss Dwyer and Little Jack Frost facing off against the Lost One. Me and the Lost One, the King of all tears. Now, and then over the page. Oh yeah, they kind of go into that a bit more. So, this is cool. This is Dane relating this to the homeless guy that he's talking to back in the future, remember? And he's saying, I remember I was dead calm. I reached into that bag. I'm not doing the accent. I reached into that bag Tom had left me, his Tesco bag that he was very protective of. And there was a little tin filled with fag ends he must have saved up from ashtrays and gutters. I crumpled them up into an ash and drew a circle around me. You know the weird thing? It's the way it all seems normal. Emphasis on normal there. You're standing there with an alien demon or something right in front of you, and it all seems normal. It's only afterwards it hits you. And while all this is going on, the King of all tears is saying to him, submit, because he's just trying to sort of like beat him, right? And the King of all tears here, yeah, it's funny, we're getting multiple sort of like visions of how the King of all tears kind of looks. And we'll go into how that's kind of meant to be working within the comic, because obviously the captions and the art are a little bit at odds at this point, as they always are, and that's kind of the beauty of the comics. So these are kind of like teeth. This is kind of like a horn. These are kind of like bug eyes, and kind of we're getting a bit more sort of facial detail on the King of all tears and what he's meant to like look like. But it's also very sort of, and he does look kind of traditionally like a slightly shit Doctor Who monster there. But also not. There's also something quite affected about this kind of like lack of design in his face. And there's obviously a really heavy influence from Nemesis the Warlock at this point, insofar as like this is a kind of an alien protagonist whose kind of dimensions and anatomy doesn't sort of fit, doesn't kind of make sense in a way that we would be able to imagine how it sees and how it appears, and what that kind of how it sort of looks in comparison to other objects that we do understand and know, right? What about an object that you don't understand and know? How does that appear? And how does that manifest in the visual field kind of thing? So the kind of the slightly sort of shonkiness of the art at this point. Remember, we're still. Oh, we'll get to the credits in a minute. But uh, yeah, the and we're losing a little bit of fidelity in terms of the way that like someone like Phil Jimenez would have drawn it a few issues ago, especially in terms of you know uh, Miss Dwyer's bum armor. Like we're dealing with much more sort of traditional seeming alien demon monsters in this quasi superhero comic. But what am I trying to say? But in a way, we're kind of the way it's quite interesting the way that we're sort of seeing more of them, and the kind of and although the design isn't as cool and weird as it would have been a couple of issues ago, because the art is undergoing certain pressures at the moment, the overall effect of the indistinctness and the not quite workingness is kind of quite still sort of works, still quite pleasant, still quite like fits the comic. So Dana's talking about what it's like to confront an ancient archon using magic circle made out of old fag ash. And he says, it's only afterwards as it hits you. After it all, you're thinking, what the fuck was that? It couldn't get at me. I didn't know how, but I'd managed to put up a shield. So basically, this is just like a nice kind of comic book rendering of how the magic circle, which is very old, like technology for how you protect yourself when you're talking to an extra dimensional entity, a demon, right? Demons are things that sorcerers and whatnot have met in ways not dissimilar to this down the years. And it's really interesting that like uh, basically all of this kind of narration is obviously pulled quite clearly from Grant Morrison's experience with doing similar things. He's very open about the fact that he's done chaos magic rituals to evoke you know, entities, some of which are probably just demons from old books or whatever. And it's really interesting. I talked in previous episodes about how like the comic kind of unveils and just kind of presents in a very sort of available mass format. This is just in every newsagent in the UK at this point. This comic book still, even it takes a few months to get there, it is just there. So these are what would traditionally have been the dangerous occult knowledge of the ages, and it was made available to the general public in around the 1960s. A child of the 1960s, Grant Morrison, has explored it, and now he's kind of not spat it. That's a bit of a dismissive word. Sorry. And now he's just kind of represented it in a comic book, and it's quite real. It's quite kind of first hand and quite kind of authentic and quite kind of it's quite real. He is just saying, well, I evoked a demon and now I'm writing a comic about it, and I'm using my knowledge of what that's like to inform the comic. So all of the things that he says are very sort of interesting and relatable. And what was I going to say? And he can feel the influence of Mr. Six, his ascended master friend, helping him, who remember was literally his teacher. I felt like I wasn't alone in my head. It felt like I had guests. That's it, Dane. Try to remember. Remember what you are. Then something just clicked. It wasn't in my head. It was like a door opened in my heart, and I knew what to do. I'd always known. And these are all like these aren't that weird. They're fairly like this kind of sense of having, when you're doing stuff like this sense of having someone with you who's on your side, because you've basically kind of part of the tech of the magic circle. It's not just creating a shield. You're basically placing yourself in context with every other person who's ever done that for you. So when you're sitting there in that circle, you're sitting there with every other wizard, sorcerer, and magician who has ever done that. and you're all kind of sharing that space and sharing and supporting one another, and it's quite an enriching and sort of you do achieve this weird sense of like serenity and confidence when you're doing because because there's loads of other dudes just like you and dudettes and whatnot who've got your back. Literally, you're in play with all of them at once, because this act of creating this circle and of calling up these things, this the circle is a time travel machine. Not to put too fine a point on it. Over the page, we take our visit to Sam Goody Music Land. Confession: haven't listened to either of these. Literally don't know anything about them. Although maybe that's interesting too. Like again, great design. I'm not sure. I mean, these like the kind of the background here with this like cheesy floating garage rock head, and then kind of like this kind of Kennedy looking guy with a big fat cranium, and this sort of like 50 like or late 50s early 60s kind of American suburbia feel around it. It's really good. It's really really well designed. The design of these um adverts for Sam Goody Music Land have come on in leaps and bounds, and this is really cool. Um, and then the cover art for these two hit bands is not as good. It's Electric Larryland by the Butthole Surfers. I don't know much about them. I kind of know a little bit. I don't really have much time for the American hardcore scene. Really, it doesn't really speak to me. But I will. I am going to do my duty and eat my greens and go back and listen to these. I don't know who, because I just feel like I should. And if something really interesting pops up that resonates with what's in the issue, I'll let you know. And the Wallflowers, don't know much about them either. What do you think? What do you think the Wallflowers are like? I think they are American college jangle pop. They're not going to be. I think they're going to be kind of like Smiths influenced, slightly warmer, more kind of open and power chordy, still quite fey American jangle pop. That's what I think the Wallflowers are like. And quite kind of retro for the 90s. I think they're quite. Um, that's just my guess, based upon the fact that they're called the Wallflowers and they've got very lame cover art, very like dull. And it's called Bringing Down the Horse. Oh God, maybe they're just maybe it's just fucking cowboy rock, like that terrible country band that I hated last time. Can't remember their name. Don't care. Nido, Kino, Swellerino. See, this is really great advert for two records which I haven't done my due diligence and checked out, and I do apologise. So yeah, the arc on the King of War Tears just throws loads of like demon magic at the Jack, but he's safe in a circle, and he adopts like this kind of like cross-legged Buddha position. So he's kind of like the Buddha, but also just like a good boy at school. Over the page, we've got another advert. This time it's for Ace Ventura, Pet Detective. I think the resonance that we will look for here is the way that he's riding two alligators, which is awesome. I mean, this is a funny film. I haven't seen it for ages, but I remember it being a laugh. It's a jungle out there. So we're kind of maybe talking about how, given that Dane has just entered into a very sort of straightforward confrontation with demonic forces within this very sort of traditional you draw a circle in the floor and you sit down and you start to just kind of evoke this kind of adversary or not adversary, like helper that you're gonna converse with and come to some sort of not come to some sort of bargain with, right? It's a jungle out there, and I think so. I'll just get over this now. One of the things that happens when you're in that situation is that you realize that like when you get into the circle, you realize that like the whole of everything outside of the circle is absolutely teeming with spirits of kind of like literal, like almost infinite, unimaginable range. Like every blade of grass has an ecology of spirits living on it, and there's millions of spirits just sort of milling around that you can pick up on. And one of the things, there was another podcast about the Invisibles by Gordon White and his guest, can't remember the guest name, I do apologise, from the Rune Soup website, who I'm sure I've mentioned before, who's kind of, because he's really good on the chaos magic stuff that was really which is very much in the air for all of the Invisibles. Uh, they were talking about the Archons, and they said a really good thing about how the Archons are very small. They've grown big, but in their because they've basically just been fed blood for generations. But so they've grown fat and powerful on that. But actually, they're very small. Um, they're not like primal forces of the universe that the universe can't live without. They're not like they're not like God, right? They're not like they don't have. They're not like they're not like a god. They're not like God or a god that kind of has some sort of intrinsic connection to the way the universe is held together. These are like the archons. It's a jungle out there. Are basically just like are like little spirits that have just kind of wandered into a circumstance which is really advantageous for them, and they've gone, okay, okay, this human is gonna kill chickens for me, okay, and they've used that, and not just chickens, obviously humans as well, and all sorts, made all kinds of sacrifice to it to empower it, um, and they've become powerful, but they're not like part of the fabric of the universe that like must be maintained in order for cosmic balance to exist or whatever, like or for existence itself to be possible. That's not their vibe. That's not what they are. They're little spirits that kind of almost just like by accident, or maybe through manipulation, a combination of all these various factors, obviously, got big. And that's why everything that the King of all Tears and Miss Dwyer do is on this like nanotechnology level, right? Because they are tiny, they're microscopically small things, and all of their thinking and ambitions are small, right? All like the whole kind of cosmology of the Invisibles is that like the Invisibles are kind of like creative and expansive, and the Archons are constrictive and restrictive, right? So they want to make the potential of the universe smaller because they're small, because they only understand smallness. They can only do smallness. So they're working on this nano level of restriction and reduction and of lessening. They make everything lesser by their presence, right? Uh, and this thing here, this kind of hip lad forming this weird jungle foot pyramid thing, is a bit like that. Put your money where your fucking mouth is, dickhead. Sorry for doing the accent. This is our splash page. It's really good. Like Dane in his circle with his Tesco bag, swearing at this sort of spooky comic book demon. It's really good. Uh, yeah, and I think sorry, just going back like that. It's obviously like wizards standing in circles and talking to demons. That's something which has been in comic books forever, right? But it's never been related via a gobby little like just a yob, just like a gobby little scouse kid who's into techno, you know, and to kind of bring that home in this way is it's basically unique, and I think kind of not just because it's mass produced, but because it just kind of puts all of that kind of like highfalutin, uh, all of the stuff about magic being reserved for very serious special guys. It makes it kind of accessible to the proletariat, and that's really cool, basically. And kind of just like, no, you can do this, and you can have this. This is an affordance for you, uh, even if you're just a horrible little gobshite from Croxteth. Croxteth or Toxteth? I can't remember. Croxteth is Croxteth, isn't it? Um, you're like you can do it as well, and that's empowering. That's empowering. And we've got our credits. Grant Morrison, writer. I recently found out that I think I mentioned before that Grant Morrison had recently come out of non-binary, and that's great, good for them. And but it is them, and I think I had said at the time I was going to keep calling them him until I had heard different. Well, I've heard different, so we're going to go with them. If I slip and use him or other, he pronouns for them, I apologize. And it's not because I'm a dick. It's because well, no, I am a dick. It's not because I'm a nasty dick. It's because I'm a stupid dick. Okay, one of those I don't want to be. The other one I don't mind. Grant Morrison, writer; Steve Yoel, penciler; Dick Giordano, inker; Daniel Vozzo, colorist; Clem Robbins, the letterer; Shelley Roberg, the editor, and the Invisibles were created by Grant Morrison. Good on them for letting us have this ace comic that we can read through. So we cut back. This is still basically like one of the action scenes we had in the last issue. Nice dynamic panels, as you can see. There's this interesting, still got this interesting tension between Steve Yoel's kind of like the way that he kind of pushes your view into the middle of the panel, but then the way that like Dick Giordano's inks kind of spread everything across the page, right? There's an interesting sort of reading flow at work here, and because this is like an action scene, even though like not enough happens to make the action very dynamic, they make the kind of the rhythm of the page work in quite a dynamic fashion. So these long kind of lateral, kind of horizontal, vertical panels working against these sort of lateral ones. It's got a nice jagged kind of aggressive rhythm, not aggressive, but like action-packed rhythm to it. Even though not much is happening, uh, Jim Crow kind of offhandedly makes some comparisons, saying that Mickey Mouse, as being like a mouse-headed monster, is a bit like the Fly, which is quite interesting. I think there's some stuff in there which will come up in the second book in a couple of months' time and onwards about the Disney meme and about how that kind of theoriomorphs representations that have effects on the way that people think in a way which is well, a bit like this really. Yeah, like there's basically a fly coming out of someone's head. So speaking of, what's it called, theorio crano, don't get lost in it, Bobsy. We've got the number 6. We've got lots of those. We've got him charging up his Zozo gun with erotic visualization. I think that means that he kind of like sends dirty thoughts into his gun, and that he converts that into orgone blasts, which sort of just turn the zombie dude into mosquitoes. because obviously his body is very subject to the decaying process that the King of All Tears is bringing into the local area. And this, so yeah, so the erotic visualizations are very kind of nasty for the zombies. It's all a bit, it's quite good fun, but it's a little bit like what compared to the fairly down to earth and like straight stuff that's going on between Dane and the King of All Tears. This other thing about a guy with a magic gun zapping zombies. And I think the difference is that the zombie here is dead, like is an animated corpse, the one with the clothes on, because remember that's the one that King Mob shot in the head, and this one, who was basically just fucked up by Fanny's magic, isn't dead, and you can tell that that's that one because Fanny's nicked his clothes. These are the dead guys who are in the building. Remember, so this one's still alive and this one's dead. So this one just kind of gets disappeared, like literally just like decomposes into mosquitoes, and this one has its kind of like nasty devil beast rider thing, but isn't dead. And I think Jim Crow is quite careful not to further kill him, or not to further kill him, but to kill him, but to just free him from his devil rider thing here, which is cool. So he's not like, even though he's well into death, old Jim, he's not quite the kind of killer that King Mob is, for instance. And he's kind of like loving it. This is all very much his territory. Remember, he's still being like ridden by Papagade. He's not really just Jim at the moment. He's Jim and his voodoo patron. And Robin is just kind of watching, kind of going, "Oh my goodness." And then we get more interesting sort of stuff from Dane's perspective. He's still talking to the guy that he's talking to back up in the future, but this is page 8. But he's talking to him quite closely about what's going on between him and the King of All Tears. It's weird because they don't really look scary. This is Dane. It's weird because they don't really look scary. And indeed, as I've been saying, this alien doesn't really look scary, but it's kind of as a way of like figuring what a demon in a comic looks like. It is quite unusual. It's weird because they don't really look scary. They're aliens and all that, but when you see them, it's more like special effects. It's like something out of a film, like a computer simulation. You look at it and it's just so unreal you have to accept it. Like it's just another object which has appeared in front of you. Happens. It's not how they look that's scary, it's the way they make you feel. Every shitty thing you've ever done, every horrible, sick thought you've ever had, they turn it back on you until you can't think of anything else. They can read you like a book and pull out whatever page it takes to make you feel like you're sick or useless or guilty. They can break your heart and shit on yourself. I'm not quite sure that's all true. It might feel true, but like I think that like a lot of the fear and disgust reactions that demons kind of try to get you with, they are it's more like they're taking educated guesses than actually know you. You know, like they don't have the ability to read. Well, some do, but it's not like they all have. They all have the ability to read your mind and you turn that against you. But they're sort of just like crafty enough, cunning enough that they know what sort of spots are likely to work. They're a bit like con men in that regard, insofar as they're like, well, humans aren't that. Humans are all pretty much of a muchness. So let's he's probably got some romantic stuff in his background that he's ashamed of or hurts him still. So let's push on that and see what happens. It's not quite the same as them being able to see right through you, as we literally have here and understand everything that's going on in your head. It's more like they're cold reading you, right? They remind you why you deserve it. So we have this weird interlude here of Jack and Crystal Quinn, who is definitely his old girlfriend from when they were kids, even though they're still sort of kids. So this is kind of like probably only a couple of years ago this is happening. At most, they're snogging in the graveyard. This graveyard with its tree is like obviously some kind of. It's interesting that Dane looks like he's probably got like a tonsure there. He probably looks like a monk. Yeah, and they're basically doing it in the or trying to do it in that very sort of teenage fumbly sort of way. Dialogue and stuff is already good. Jane doesn't fancy Billy. Remember Billy from a couple of issues ago who snitched in Dane to cops. Jane doesn't fancy Billy. She says he's got too many zits. Biactol boy, she calls him. Biactol is like a teenagers use it to wash their faces, and it's not funny. Crystal Quinn. Crystal, obviously, the name Crystal is fairly self-explanatory in this regard, I think, as to why she would be called Crystal. The name Quen comes from like O'Quinn or O'Cuin, ancient Irish warlord. Basically, Quinn, Dwyer, McGowan, these are all very similar Irish names, basically. So the Irish connect, kind of, or the Celtic, if you like, connect, working here in terms of the deep history that's somehow culminating in Dane's ability to change the world is still in play because his true love was a woman called Crystal Quinn. We find out from this, and the weird thing is that they're playing in like getting off in this graveyard, and they're by Dane's grave. So obviously this isn't a memory. This is a kind of a dream phantasmagoria space that's where all this stuff is happening. It's not although it's built out of memories, it's not the memories, right? And amusingly, Dane's middle name is Paul. So for all of the there's the Eleanor Rigby thing that you might want to be thinking about here if you know your Beatles lore. But for all of the Dane is associated with John Lennon, the edgy Beatle. His middle name is actually Paul, like the uncool Beatle. And Paul, the uncool Christian apostle as well, obviously. So that's quite funny. That's quite funny that Dane isn't named after any of the cool Beatles. He's named after the uncool one. And then he's kind of like trying it on a bit too far, getting a bit too fresh with Crystal. She kind of pushes him back. Cut to the next page 10. The King, Mob, and Fanny are fighting Miss Dwyer. Fanny's got a gun and she shoots her a couple of times, but Samars insists it's alive. It absorbs the kinetic energy of your bullets and feeds it straight back into its power source. She's just playing with you. Adrenal glands taste better when they're aroused. Such a great old horror trope that the reason that the baddies don't just kill you straight away is because they feed on your fear. and that's kind of what demons do too, right? And that's why they make you scared, is because that's one of the things that they can vibe on. Not all demons, but sort of some. That's an advert for the Sandman. We're not going to really tarry on that, except to say that this is Norman Mailer. Hi, Norm. I hope you're watching. Norman Mailer's a comic strip for intellectuals, quote, which was all over Sandman comics at the time. They would throw that quote. Norman Mailer, the great American man of letters, says that the Sandman is a comic strip for intellectuals, which is kind of reason enough not to read it, really. Great picture by Kelly Jones. That is a banging picture of the Sandman by by Kelly Jones, who's one of the great Batman artists, one of the great sort of like comic book horror artists. That is very cool, the way that his cape has become this kind of strange shadow mountain thing. But that's all. We're not really going to carry on the Sandman advert. This is an advert for Cyberella. So this is boring, but like there was Vertigo is like a kind of a at this point Vertigo is like a kind of a goth horror young adult imprint that DC Comics published under. They at this point broke off to spun off another imprint using Stuart Moore, the editor of the Invisibles, as was prior to Shelley Robo taking over, right? And whereas like the like oh god, whereas the Vertigo kind of emphasis was like goth young adult horror, this was like goth young adult sci-fi, which isn't really like they shouldn't have tried to spin it off. They should have just all done this under the Vertigo imprint, and it would have sat quite happily, really. I think. Cyberella, story by Howard Chaykin and art by Don Cameron. I don't know who's drawn that actual bit. It's a great like comic book cover image. All of these TV screens behind, or sorry, monitors behind, and Cyberella. What's a girl to do? The inferno is on the internet. The devil has gone digital. The hordes of hell are here. What's a girl to do? Cyberella. That's the story of the Invisibles. In not so many words. The inferno is on the internet. The devil has gone digital. The hordes of hell are here. What's a girl to do? That's the story of the Invisibles, but also literally the story of what's happening on this page of the digital devil. What's a girl to do? And then you've got this very interesting, I think, resonance between these kind of cool Bride of Frankenstein green stripes in Cyberella's head as she's kind of actioning towards the screen, and then this, these angles with these kind of green Spider-Man web slime shooters that are coming out of Miss Dwyer's wrist on the following page, back in the comic. The kind of the fit between the color and the angles here between these two green lines is eerie, let's say. And Miss Dwyer does like a Spider-Man thing and sort of jizzes all over, does like green snot slime jizz all over Fanny to tie her up, and then advances for the kill. Oh, it's scary. Fanny looks worried. We feel bad for her. And then we're sort of back in Dane's dream world. He's vandalising a bus in a minor way, just writing DM for CQ. Dane loves Crystal on the bus, and this old bastard says, "Oh, you little yob," and he tells him to fuck off, which is great. Nice thing here about the only person you were really allowed to love was your girlfriend. You couldn't love your mum or dad. You couldn't love your mates. You could only love your girlfriend, which is an interesting way of thinking about like sort of teenage romance, especially the kind of teenage romance which is like sort of like the script of the rock and pop mythology that Invisibles is very sort of keen to ally itself with, and that is kind of like the basic boy meets girl story form that so much of comic bookery and popular culture literature is about. And it's a nice way to put it. The only person you're really allowed to love is your girlfriend. It just feels so great being allowed to feel that way, like a million locked doors all opening at once, which is nicely put. She was the only person I ever admitted to loving, but she could see him going out with an older guy from the bus. This is a London bus. Did they have buses in Liverpool like that? Yeah, it doesn't actually. It's not a London bus. That's just the door of the bus. That's not like the back open back end type bus. Fucking tragic. So this is Crystal, Dane's true love, and she's getting off with an older guy, with an older boy. This is an incredibly like thing that happens. Uh, this is like an unspoken trauma that all men have, is that the girls you fancy when you're young fancy older men, and it's like what? Uh, but we're the same age. It's like, yeah, but you're an idiot. I'm like a cool girl, and I fancy this guy, and it's like, oh, every boy at school is like, well, this sucks. That's not fair. Um, and Dane is really like feeling it here and simmering over it. Um, and she's saying he's 23, Dane. He's got a car. He's like, I can get a fucking car. He makes £100 a week, which isn't much. Even back then, it wasn't much. It's about 10 grand a year. In it's about 5 grand a year in their money, which is about 10 grand a year in our money. So I don't know what this guy was doing. But it's barely enough money to pay the rent and run a car, is it? He obviously lives with his parents. He's 23, Dane. This is 23. 23. Doesn't mean anything really. Um, how do you much? How much do you get for shagging that prick? Well, at least he knows what to do. Oh, gutted, and Dane is really gutted, and he's back in his kind of dream grave world under the tree, sitting kind of in despair. And we can see that he was born in 1980, but we don't know when he's died yet. We can see that he was born in 1980, so that we know Dane is 16 at this point. But at this point, he was probably only 14. The way he's like pissed off and smoking a fag here is really well drawn. So basically, these, if you notice, there's not just this kind of like, the colouring is great in the way that this kind of like sort of buttery sunshine colour is being used a lot, and tones similar to it. Obviously, it pops. It's kind of the same colour as Dane's hair. Uh, this guy, yeah, like, is it Clem Robbins, the colour? I think it is, isn't it? He's kind of got a grip on the colours, and he's doing with the colours in this issue a lot of what the inks and the pencils don't have time to do. Also, the lack of backgrounds. So there's not much, because this is like a dream world. There's not much background, right? It's all just like surface, upfront, close detail is the only thing that you can see. Or not detail, but like object, the only thing that you can see. So basically, what I'm saying is the inks are having to do a lot less work this issue than they were last issue. So the art feels a little bit more thorough, feels a little bit more neat and there. To kind of emphasize the sort of the unreal space that most of it is taking place in. Uh, he dumped her in the end and fucked off to London or something. The police were after him for shagging a minor. Now that doesn't happen. Schoolgirls always get off with guys who are in their 20s in the UK, or they did when I was a kid, and no one calls the police. I mean, maybe there's a better awareness. I hope there's a better awareness of this kind of thing here in 2021, given the kind of the scandals of the last decade or two. But back in the mid 90s, that guy, or at least if you're in, maybe in the cities and stuff is different, but in the countryside where I was, that guy didn't get wanted by the police. He just, you know, the girl basically just got older and went, oh, why are you perfect on schoolgirls, you creepy guy? But yeah, this guy is basically, so he's 23, she's 14, we think. So she's definitely less than 16 because this happened in Dane's past. We know that Dane's been in the Invisibles for a year, so this she can only be 14 or 15 at this point. He's 23, so he's a paedophile and a rapist, and that's what Dane's fighting here. That's nasty, and this is all so subcutaneous in British culture at this point. Like I say, the last 20 years have elevated consciousness of this kind of thing going on a lot more, but this is like incredible. This is like incredibly banal evil uh, that happens all the time. It happened all the time, and the kind of the pinpointing of it here is like like a thing that's abroad in the culture, um, and it causing bad times for Dane and causing bad times for everyone really. Um, it's quite cool that it's in the comic. Then we get this other kind of weird dream sequence where it's all about her having had basically she gets pregnant by that guy. This is all like Dane's kind of, this is the demon bringing up all of Dane's trauma, and he's like got this kind of like macho white knight fantasy of himself, kind of comforting her as she recovers from the abortion of the fetus that the nonce there gave to her, which is like, it's getting a bit much here, actually. The kind of the stacking up the traumas on this character who isn't really in the comic and is only a figment of Dane's imagination, and then does this weird S&M, not S&M, just like this weird like leather come on to him. Uh, Barbalith activates in Dane's head so that he's able to kind of be like, oh, and obviously like this is unreal here, right? This is his weird fantasy takes a turn which is abrupt enough to actually make him realize that he's that this isn't real, which is maybe an interesting point, like that feeling or the truth of Barbalith turning on in your head and coming to rescue you as this kind of like angel computer that lives behind the moon. Um, it's just like that moment of lucidity that you can have yourself when you're in a dream, and when you realize that your dream is a dream, whether that dream is reality or not, you know, that's pretty far out, mate. But uh, that's not a bad way of thinking about what Barbalith is. Is like this moment of clarity appealing for you, which is maybe why it looks a bit like a laser pointer dot, in that it shows you the thing that you're thinking about, or reminds you of the thing that you're thinking about. Isn't, like that moment of realization in your bad dream when you realize it's a dream and not actually happening. That's Barbalith power. Advert over the page for DC's current comics. It's a Books of Magic issue illustration. We don't look at those. Yeah, more stuff about Barbalith. More stuff about so we see that this this like sexy image of Crystal is actually just the King of all Tears kind of doing an illusion basically for him, or kind of like rifling through his dreams to find something which can kind of tempt him out of the circle. Basically, this is all. I mean, probably this doesn't need saying, but this is all paralleling the temptations of the Buddha. It becomes quite explicit when you see him under the tree. So, like, so which would make the King of all Tears like Mara, the tempter, and the Lord of Death in like Buddhist tradition. Buddhism is obviously a very 90s religion in the UK because it's the religion of surfing, and surfing the internet and surfing like waves. It's Buddhism, right? Sorry for being glib about what is obviously a very beautiful and ancient religion, but like Morrison uses it a lot here because it was the 90s, and if you were into you know backpacking, which we know that Morrison is, you were a bit into Buddhism. Uh, so yeah, so and like oh god, I can't remember all of them, but the temptations of the Buddha are basically um, sex, power. So yeah, Mara sort of sends his hot daughters to come and tempt uh, Buddha out of his meditation, just as he's on the point of becoming enlightened and redeeming the universe. Yeah. Um, so one of them is like sensuousness. One of them is like like power, and one of them is like this kind of appeal to, oh god, I can't remember. I'm rubbish at this. One of them is like this appeal to like what what basis do you have? What like upon what ground do you sit to have the right to resist me? Quite a quite a conceptual and metaphysical kind of like reason why you don't deserve to be enlightened. It's a bit like, who gives you the right to be enlightened over me? I'm the Lord of Death. Who are you, princeling? Um, and basically Buddha's answer to that is, I'm the Earth, because we're all part of the Earth. Yeah. Um, but yeah, and these trials. So we've just had the kind of the temptation of like sexiness to pull Dane out of the circle, and we get these. Oh yeah, death is obviously one of the other ones. Is like, you're going to die, Buddha. So why are you bothering to be enlightened? Uh, and so we get a vision. The Buddha is like served visions of his own death um, by Mara, and we get this here. So we fast forward to 2050, and Dane is an old man dying in hospital. Mr. McGowan, can you hear me? He's hallucinating, Doctor. Um, this is fun. There's some good sci-fi chat here. We can't do anything. He doesn't even have basic wet drive facilities. No DNA access. No credit scan codes. No infoglobin. Jacked up cyber blood. pre-Jack, a relic. Look, only 70 and looks 160, which is weird because do these doctors know what 160-year-olds look like by 2050? Because those people would have had to have been born in 1890, and I'm pretty sure that all people from 1890 are dead already. Yeah, that would make them 130. There's no one that old, is there? So there aren't any people aged 160 in this world. That's not what has happened to longevity. But they're like, well, this guy's 70. That's a really young age because we're in 2050 where everyone lives to be like well old. And all of this Gibson chat about he doesn't even have basic wet drive facilities, no DNA access, no credit scan codes. So this is kind of like the digital dystopia that we're sort of seeing. Feels fairly plausible still, apart from maybe the nano blood, except for your vaccine, right, listener? uh, uh, and it's really confusing because so they're using all of this these future words to talk about Dane, and they say pre-Jack, which is a bit confusing because that sounds like before the age of Jack, and we know that Dane is a bit like the Buddha, not just from what happens in this issue, but we know from previous issues that Dane is like maybe the Maitreya, the chosen one, right? So they're saying that he is pre-Jack, which could be like the age of Jack, as in like BC, as in like the age of Jesus. Pre-Jack could be before Jack, right? Before Jack Frost became the Buddha. But I don't but I think it means like jacking in. I think it means like that all of these people are like cyborgs and they're all jacked up into the internet, and that's cool. But this guy is pre-Jack, and I think that's kind of I think it's slightly awkward use of the word Jack in an issue which uses it a lot and this is a abruptly different way of using it. I quite like the thought in both directions, and I also love the thought that in the 90s the internet was jacking in. You've got to jack in to you've got to upjack into the internet, which is basically like you stick a USB into a hole in your head somewhere. Jack in. I think it's VSAD. So they're also using like Newspeak, like Orwellian Newspeak. Right? I think it's VSAD. Hardly any of them left now. Poor old bugger. I wonder if he could talk. Famous last words, And basically, it's funny because Jack's last words are obviously he's trying to say fuck because that's what Jack says, but he dies before he's able to. There he goes. Good timing, huh? Pub's open in 10 minutes. Now, what's interesting about this is that it imagines this kind of like cyber 2050 future where all of this, neuromancer stuff is happening. And then also there's pubs. And I'm a bit like, I don't know if there will be. I don't know if pubs have got that much of a future. And then we see here, okay, so this is taking place in 2051 because the to date has been filled in his headstone here in this dream graveyard that he's in. And also, quite interestingly, the long shadow of the tree that he's meditating under looks a bit like an open grave, right? And then, so all of these kind of visions that was the vision of his death. And then we're shown this vision of the demons, which is one of the Buddha's ones as well, right? The Buddha just like Mara just kind of goes, what makes you think you can be enlightened? I've got all of these hordes of demon power and soldiers, basically. Yeah, I think they're kind of called soldiers in most of the scriptures. And we have a soldier here who's kind of like having a go at Dane for killing him, and we know that Dane feels really, really bad about that. But and also like, sorry, mate, but we know what the baddies are like. We know that Dane burnt down his school or set fire to his school, and he was nicked, and they were going to lobotomize him for that. And then this guy had a gun on him, and would have shot Jack if Jack hadn't shot him first, perhaps, or at the very least would have taken him back to somewhere worse than that ball stall for torturing and lobotomy again. So fuck this guy with his oh poor me, God, I was just a bloody bloke. Like, no, you weren't. Fuck off. And then all these hordes of demons, and then Jack says they always fall back on the monsters and the shitty special effects stuff when they're up against the wall. Somewhere, somehow, I knew I had him beat. And then Mr. Sick, and then that's great because the keynote is, I think, the art isn't quite great here, but this is like the King of Water is lying dead on the floor, like because like Dane's just beaten him, because this kind of vision of whoa, scary demons wasn't enough to tempt, or wasn't enough to kind of shake Jack from his resolve or tear him out of the circle. But we see that it's just a Philip K. Dick switcheroo, because Mr. Six and Boyd come along going, Dane, come on, man, we got to get you out of here. But again, over the page, we see that that's just the King of Water isn't dead. He's just using, he's just pretending to be Boyd to kind of tempt him out. But he quickly realizes that doesn't work. He tries another tactic, which is appearing as Dane's future self, which is kind of a bit like his future self here, but is wearing even more future padded jacket. I mean, it's quite interesting, really. The future Jack's like mod dad fashion choice is good, uh, and hair, and kind of like he has got like Weller man hair, sort of. So it's kind of all short up the back and then kind of fringy. Uh, so he's got like kind of a modified skin cut kind of thing. Uh, then gives him this big thing about there is a war on. So basically, the war between the Invisibles and the baddies. This whole universe is just like a munitions factory. They make bombs. A perfected human soul like Buddha or Jesus is the ultimate weapon. They're trying to turn you into a bomb, and they're going to detonate you, and that's going to destroy the entire world. Interesting to think about what happens to the Buddha or Jesus in this context, then, having been a destruction of the old world. And obviously, that's not a physical or kind of literal destruction, but in terms of how the higher realm, which is creating these perfected human soul bombs, sees it, is that the entire space-time continuum is destroyed by the detonation of these bombs, which is an interesting Gnostic take on, kind of like Gnostic theosophically derived, I think, take on what enlightenment is. It's pretty bleak, obviously. It's pretty Beckettian again. The idea that like the kind of the soul is real and important, but has nothing to do with any human quality whatsoever. Like that's pretty Sam Beckett again. Um, uh, Giant Manichean intelligences, but again, we see that this is just, and I don't know. I think that this is basically one of those conspiracy theories that I'm supposed to talk about, as in like a kind of like a fairly nihilistic Gnostic take on what the purpose of a human soul is to be used as a weapon between these clashing forces. It's not that convincing, is it? Because you're a bit like, if you're this highly abstract intelligence, why are you fighting? Why are you building bombs? Out of, no matter how sophisticated and weird the tech that you're using is, like humans, why? And if all of reality is just a factory for making these soul bombs, why haven't these Manichean intelligences sorted their shit out? And then, so yeah, Barbalith is kind of like the perfected soul, which lives in all of us, remember, at the back of our heads. Turns on when we need them. And then, you win. This is kind of the demon admitting defeat. I don't really know if the King of Ortiz is defeated by all of Dane's Malarkey in this issue, or if he still shows up in the next one. Can't remember. And Dane is kind of like, having defeated all of these illusions, Dane is on the precipice of becoming enlightened. I had one. I'd seen through all of it, every stupid fantasy, every cheap conjuring trick. That's when it happened. Oh, and then we cut back to Robin and Jim. They've defeated the zombies, and there's one thing that happens here. We'll talk about this in the future, but you know how like Robin's got a bracelet which she's configured to stop the evil nano machines from giving her cancer. Jim kind of goes, well, that's a bit weird, isn't it? When were you born? And she says June the 14th. I haven't tracked down the significance of June the 14th, but this will become in play like further down the line. And he says, yeah, but what year? 1988. So Robin's only 6 years old, and she's got future technology. She's got futuristic technology on her wrist. Don't know how nobody had noticed that or mentioned it at any point prior to now. Maybe it just looked like a nice bracelet. But yeah, she's got future tech. So what does that mean? Where does she come from? We don't know much about Robin yet, but we're beginning to find out. Right? That's all. This is all book 2 plot stuff. Um, let's blah, blah, blah. Yeah, over the page advert for Aztec, the Ultimate Man. This was a short-lived DC comic, superhero comic that Grant Morrison did with Mark Millar. I remember that his. I don't remember much about it. I remember that they lived in a cool, creepy city that had that was deliberately psychogeographically malign to produce supervillains, and that he is like the guy who has been given this ancient legacy of of Aztec themed superheroes to battle them. I remember it being pretty good, but was a bit short lived. Didn't really didn't find an audience, and they cancelled it. His power source in his chest, Aztecs. Obviously, you got to think about Lord Fanny and stuff at this point, because that's called magic mirror, which is the stuff that we've seen. Well, I think all of them have it to some degree, but we've seen Lord Fanny use it a lot for future power stuff, right? For magic stuff. And this is they're taking. So this is Morrison repackaging a lot of the 4-dimensional time stuff, power, uh, and repurposing it and all of the Aztec mythology stuff, and repurposing it for a superhero that he can flog to DC Comics. And it kind of worked long enough. I'm sure they got some money out of it. And then we're back in the room with Dane, and he has this kind of very sort of cosmic Buddha trip. I don't know if there's much to say about it other than what's here. A circle of minds, an infinite circumference. I thought I was Dane McGowan. And I was humming into joining things. Dane McGowan was one of the things we made so that we could experience the end. The end of what? And then kind of the whole universe. There. Do you understand? And he has this kind of awakening of knowledge. I knew by heart the DNA codes of starfish and giraffes and people from Sri Lanka. I knew the third word on page 14 of the Cat in the Hat. The Cat in the Hat wasn't one of the Dr. Seuss books that was banned recently for being really racist. Not just a bit racist, but really racist. And they've only banned the racist ones. They haven't banned all of Dr. Seuss's work by any means. That'd be silly. Um, uh, but that's an interesting, timely resonance to have popped up right through the comic, the Dr. Seuss thing. Because that happened this month too. Was it last month? I think it was this month. A load of Dr. Seuss books with, as I say, really racist caricatures in them, got kind of taken off library shelves in America. I don't think that's that a big deal. I don't think that's that big of a deal. I really don't. It doesn't feel like censorship. It feels like just removing kind of things which could be quite upsetting to people, because we're a public library. Well, I'm going to read Dr. Seuss now. Really? Okay, fine. You're better off reading the less racist. Like Green Eggs and Ham is less racist and more fun than the Evil Chinaman one they've taken off. Have I ever told you how lucky you are? That's my favourite. That's the really terrifying Dr. Seuss one. I can't remember if it's racist or not, but that was the one that I had when I was a kid, and it's just full of these, again, very Beckettian, kind of existential traps, and of people living the worst possible life, and it's the most desolate, bleak children's book in the history of the world. Quite like Dr. Seuss for that. But yeah, did I ever tell you how lucky you are? If you want to have a thoroughly depressing time, read that when you're 5. And then there was this thing. So he has this kind of unfolding fractal Buddha lotus experience. This is really good, strong acid stuff here, guys. He's properly peaking. It was flat at first, then it was solid, and then it was more than solid, and then more and more than solid, more and more and more. So this is like the universe being created out of a complex universe being created out of binary simplicity, right? So it's a bit like Buddha and surfing, and B, a bit like the age of the internet being born, just like ones and zeros creating something vast. And it's also a bit like enlightenment. I like all of these Buddhas sitting here. I like the subtly different facial expressions. That one of them is a bit more kind of serene. One of them is a bit kind of obviously happy, and one of them is a bit more sort of sleepy. uh, but they're all kind of like they all kind of add up to the Buddha, right? And remember the thing I was saying about how when you're sitting in that magic circle, you feel like you've got all of these other magic dudes sitting in the circle with you. It's all kind of happening here. But this revelation of knowledge is a false revelation, right? It's just more Maya that you're like, where you're like, oh look, you're God now. You know everything that there is to know. It's a bit like that's not what you want to know. You don't want to come out of that being like, I know everything. Uh, no one's going to like you. You're going to be a dick. And I was home. I was God looking at myself in the mirror. I was perfect in eternity. And that was when I understood the last and greatest cheap conjuring trick of them all. That's when I knew they'd got me. I mean, I think we find out more about that in the next issue. I don't think, I mean, apart from the fact that this revelation of knowledge, as distinct from wisdom, is is a big trap, right, for wannabe mystics. Uh, I mean, maybe we'll find out more about that in the next episode. As I say, I don't think we've defeated the King in Chains yet, although he might have. Although this, sorry, the King of all Tears yet. Although this could be his being defeated, I don't think it is though. This feels like just more Maya, more illusion to me. We'll find out next episode. And then, hang on a minute. We're still in a superhero comic, remember? Great. I love this shot of Mr. Six's floating eyes sucking back into his head here as the abscess starts to really go down. And I think we're meant to think that, like, the power generated by this conjuring trick is maybe what's tripped the uh, universal abscess into erupting, looking like a zit about to explode. Um, and maybe that's kind of been what this has all been about, right? So the King of all Tears, remember, took the nice dinner lady and turned her into this and tortured her into becoming a dimensional abscess. Then we've got this kind of point about in the comic earlier about how the perfected human soul is a bomb which is gonna explode and destroy the entire space-time continuum. This is all maybe what's been happening here is that uh, Dane's kind of experience and the perfection of his soul is actually just the kind of the way that the King of all Tears is powering up this um, dimensional bomb gateway that's going to detonate to change all of reality because I don't know quite why, because I think that's what's happening here is that Dane's psychic energy is being used to power up this evil dimensional bomb that they're going to use to rewrite reality. I don't know how much reality they're going to destroy. I don't think that what's been going on lately with Dane and King Mob and stuff in this room, I don't see why that's a big enough deal that the powers that be, the evil powers that be, would change the entire universe for it. That seems a bit excessive. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they just kind of were going to do that anyway. Maybe that's been their plan all along, is to make a big power abscess to destroy the world. And they've tricked Dane into using all of his psychic energy to power it up, and maybe that's been the big plan. I don't know. Feels a bit kind of abruptly apocalyptic, if you know what I mean. Maybe not though. Maybe not though. I'm quite looking forward to reading the next issue, so that I'll have a bit of a better handle on what that is all about, because I can't remember, and I don't really know. Then over the page, we're onto the letters page. It's a Mark Miller letters page again, which means that Grant Morrison's still ill, and we're a bit worried about that by now at this point. But we're still not going to read any words from Mark Miller. We wouldn't poison our eyes with that. And then on the ledge page, we've got Karen Berger, who is one of the most important people in the history of the comic book, really, writing an editorial about some upcoming verite style one-off issues of comics that they've got coming up. What have they got? The System, we talked about that a bit last week. 7 Miles a Second. An unflinchingly honest autobiography of a radical, outspoken artist, his journey from child prostitute on the mean streets of New York City to pioneering activist railing against a religious and political system that condemns him, to a person with AIDS contemplating his existence and impending death. Yeah, that's we sort of saw an advert for that in the last issue, but it sounds really good actually here in Berger's excellently written description of it. And then there's also Peter Milligan and Duncan Fagredo's Girl, which we did speak a little bit about last episode. An in-your-face rite of passage tale of a teenage girl's fight from her dismal, decaying factory hometown, which is all like, yeah, there's an interesting thing about that sort of post-miners' strike, decaying factory town, flight into neoliberal London thing. All of that, and the Invisibles is a bit about that too, right? But that kind of and so is all like that's like the Britpop dream, uh, and the pulp, who again we talked about last issue, the pulp story, kind of becoming right, and it's a bit like that's super neoliberal, guys. Like you were tricked there into you know abandoning your hometown to go and live and be a machine in London. Like that. It's more complicated than that, obviously, but like that's in there, and there's not been a reckoning for the way that the kind of the rebellious culture industries in the UK during the 90s just did that, just produced gentrifiable space in London, basically, like pushing all of that human capital into that concentration there, and in the north, basically all these kind of like ex-industrial towns at least, are not having a place for themselves in the new economy. Anyway, uh, yeah, blah blah blah, and then yeah, there's some new stuff coming out. There's just some comics that Vertigo are publishing. There's an advert for Kingpin on the back. Uh, I don't know what was the name of the woman from Kingpin. Vanessa Angel. So obviously there was quite a mini golden age of like American comedy movies at the time. Like Flex Ventura. That's not it. Ace Ventura, uh, as we saw advertised earlier on. Wittenhausen, dad was a hitman, right? Or definitely like a murderer, right? Randy Quaid uh, has been, is either he's had quite a severe mental break, or he, as he claims, with his wife, has been subject to like awful gang stalking attacks in the past few years. Uh, uh, what am I going to say about? Yeah, yeah, that's quite weird that he went for folie à deux, perhaps. Like, but he's definitely he's definitely on, or has been, or was on quite a weird trip the past few years. I hope he's okay. And you know how paranoid I am. I'm not saying that he's not being gangster. Yeah, so weird bunch here. Triangle, Kingpin, King of all tears being the in this triangular shape. We saw in the Ace Ventura advert as well. Got this kind of you've got these testicles and the phallus and stuff. This is all quite a crude comedy film. It's funny. It's a good film. Kingpin, amazing turn from Bill Murray in it. His like Bill Murray's last great role really in this film. Yeah, Kingpin. We're going with King obviously as being and we're maybe connecting royalty to phallic power is maybe what, and then within this kind of fairly obvious Masonic triangle formation, with an upside down head at the top of it. It's a flat triangle. This is just the Illuminati. Sorry, but you know you got always got to end the issue on the Illuminati. Now, so what are some predictions that we can make from this? What's going to happen in 2 months' time that this comic is predicting now? It's a tricky one with like making predictions, isn't it? Because like obviously you're not going to make a prediction about something which isn't going to happen, and all of your predictions are informed about what you already know. So, or which is impossible. You can't make a prediction about something which is impossible. So it's not like I'm gonna wake up and my eyes will be green. That's not a prediction that I can make from this, even though there's a guy with green eyes in this comic. And also your assumptions about the future are always going to be based a bit about what's not just like what's imminent or implicit or able to happen in the future, but what your view of the future from here looks like. And then we start to reflect upon the fact that so many of the things that are in this issue are still really live in contemporary Britain anyway, like 2021 contemporary Britain anyway. And that gets especially so in this issue, I don't mind telling you. I wonder, so I'm trying to use this issue to predict something which is going to happen in 2 months' time. And like, just a news story, just a thing which we can kind of verify that would kind of prove the predictive or divinatory power of the Invisibles, as if it was a pack of tarot cards, say, right? And 2 months is quite a long horizon. Well, 2 months is too long for divination, really. There's too many variables that can shift between now and then to be able to make a prediction that's kind of that far ahead. You're much better on using divinatory tools like this on a shorter horizon, really. Like, what's going to happen next week? What do I need to be used short? What do I need to do now for this situation? This one caught my attention, though. This bit about the older boyfriend being nicked for raping a child, basically. Even though I'm not saying that Crystal Quinn is without any agency, but like, let's not get too much into that grey area, because the greyer you get, the grottier it gets. So maybe some kind of scandal in the British press in May about this kind of, not exact, like these kind of fucked up relationship things. So like a relationship between an older guy and a younger girl who's too young, and these relationships being somewhat under the radar socially. Maybe something like that. Maybe there's going to be some kind of story around that kind of situation surfacing in the British press. That's one of the predictions we're going to make, is some kind of nonce scandal. And I don't mean like a high level royal nonce scandal, although we'll get to that. I mean like a kind of here's a hidden everyday stratum of British society which is a bit noncy, actually. That kind of thing. Yeah. So that's one of the predictions that we're going to use this to make from that, is some kind of Nazi scandal. What else kind of really jumped out at me from this issue? Tesco's. So Tesco. So Dane's been carrying a Tesco bag around for several issues now, and he finally told us what was in it, and it was a load of faggot. It was just a load of old fag ends, right? In this issue. So, and Tesco's still very much a thing in the UK. So maybe that. So let's say that in May 2021, Tesco will be in the news, and let's be honest, it's going to be some bad news. It'll either be record-breaking price rises as a post-Brexit result thing, or a load of layoffs, like a load of stores closing and a load of people being made redundant in Tesco stores in May 2021. An announcement around that. Okay, so that's my second prediction. Kind of going in order of specificity, I guess. So the noncery one's quite vague. The Tesco one is a bit more concrete. What's the third one? I don't want it to be some kind of Eleanor Rigby, Paul McCartney dying thing. I'm not going to go there. Don't love, like, I know I said he was the uncool one, but love Paul way too much for that. Not going near that. Some kind of, I don't know. I do want a third one. I do want a third prediction to make about May 2021 on the basis of this issue. I guess we could go. I guess the safest one and the most concrete one would be that the London takeover of Liverpool. No, I don't think so. Because so spoilers. In the next issue, remember how in the previous issue, it was a bit like we don't see Boy and Mr. Six and Dane travel from London to Liverpool, even though quite a big deal was made of boys travelling from London to Liverpool. And there's that's a good 6 hours of lost story time here that was kind of a bit which you just kind of like fuzzed over. So in the next issue, we find out that actually there's an Alan Dunn's House of Fun in Liverpool and there's an Alan Dunn's House of Fun in London, and they're basically both doorways into the space where this is happening. So follow me. What that Alan Dunn's House of Fun? Remember, Boris Johnson is the clown who lives in Alan Dunn's House of Fun. What the Alan Dunn's House of Fun? I love saying that. Bit means is London and Liverpool being fused, or to put it another way, Liverpool taking over London taking over Liverpool, right? Which is going to happen and has happened to a degree. Now that'll probably just be signed, sealed, and delivered in May. There will be some sort of challenge about it in the courts. No, I don't think so. I think that might be June because I don't think that happens until the next issue. I think I'm jumping ahead. Yeah, not that. So the Liverpool and London thing is going to be a thing, but I don't think it will happen. Oh, and I guess the one would be pubs open. Pubs open in 10 minutes. And pubs are due to open around May because they've been closed. It's mental. Britain without pubs. Britain without a house for the public. It's really, really serious. It's a really bad thing. I'm not saying it's not been necessary to a degree, but it's still a bad thing. It's still really harmful for us not having pubs. Okay, I don't really have a third one. Okay, let's just say I'm going to leave it blank. So there's a noncery scandal in the UK press. There's something fucked up happening to Tesco's. All of this in May 2021. And then there's going to be a third one. The Liverpool and London stuff will rumble on, and then there's a third one, and we're going to leave that nice and blank, and we're going to think back and be like, what happened in May 2021? And it tends to be the second half of the month, but we won't be too strict on that. It tends to be the second half of the month that was predicted by this issue of The Invisibles. So I'm going to keep this issue knocking around, and we're going to see what happens in May. Noncery, Tesco's, other that this issue will have predicted by the time we get there. Yeah? Okay. Now, like I said earlier, I wanted to... God, we've been going on. I'm going to cover this in 10 minutes, I promise. Wanted to... Because this is the issue that we're going to be covering in May when we get there. So I just wanted to take that 2 month time lag thing from another perspective and see which one works better, which one gets better predictions for stuff that happens in the UK. Or no, it doesn't have to be in the UK. Can be anywhere. But obviously a big theme for this is the UK restructuring itself after the upheavals of the past however long. So that's something we need to. That's kind of just naturally where our thoughts are drifting. Yeah. Now this issue is really weird for that. So we've got because this is going to be the May issue. I think that there's going to be some. I think this is worth looking at and checking whether predictions for May in this issue, which is the May issue on our current timeline, or in this issue, a better give you better predictions. Basically, right? It's just a little test of the method. So this issue has literally got the number 6 plastered all over it for obvious prisoner reasons, and it's all like Mr. Six's close-up issue. So look for the 6th. The 6th of May, the 16th of May, or the 26th of May are days when things that might happen in this episode arise. Now, like I said, I read this issue before, and there are bits that are leaping out at it, much more so than this one, actually. This one I had to work quite hard to find resonances that feel like they've got a high likelihood of occurring in May. This one, much stronger, kind of that seems weird, kind of little details leaping out at you. So there's this one, BT Tower. It's not called BT Tower anymore, but people my age call it that. British Telecom Tower, which is this kind of very impressive, tall building in the heart of London, and was kind of for a long time when I was a kid, was the kind of the standard of the futuristic impulse of London's architecture. And even by this point in the 90s is kind of like retro and cute, and by now is even more so. But it's still a cool looking building. It's still like a cool thing in the middle of London. And also for all of you heads, it's not really a building that has got a load of satellite dishes on it for beaming phone signals and TV signals and 5G and all shit uh, around central London. It's also Tharg the Mighty One's spaceship in disguise, right? We know that. You knew that. God bless you, you knew that. So, some things in this. We're going to zip through it. Obviously, spoilers ahead for issue 25 of book 1 of The Invisibles. Father Ted. Father Ted is referenced a few times in this issue, and you know what that means in 2021. This is a Glinner scandal. And obviously, so this is Glinner is going to do some hateful bigotry shit in May 21. More so than usual. It'll be more notable than the kind of the steady background hum of Glinner anti-trans bigotry bullshit. It'll be bigger. In May 21, Glinner's going to pop up and make even more of a cunt of himself than he normally does, right? So watch for that. That's a steady one. That's a steady bet. Other stuff that's significant. This here, and this is significant for the entire issue. So this is a better bet. Crown it. Big royal thing happening in May 2021. I guess you'd say maybe Prince Philip carks it. Maybe it's more friction between the competing princes, the competing heirs. Maybe it's the Queen dies. I don't think so. But yeah, big royal bullshit in May 2021. Keep an eye out for it. Could be Andrew getting, could be like some kind of prosecution notice, some kind of extradition thing. Could be like some big bad Maxwell shit happening to Prince Andrew in May 2021. But yeah, so we've got a Glinner prediction. We've got a Royals prediction. The Royal stuff in this issue, I mean, we'll get to it, but I will give you a little bit of a sneak. But it's well good. So you've basically got Ghislaine Maxwell appearing on page 20 of issue 25 of the Invisibles book 1, which was, after all, published in October 1996, before she was very famous. She's very famous now. She wasn't then. The words Queen of Hearts appearing in relation to Princess Di, and I'm pretty sure, I'm going to look into this when we get there, I don't want to jump the gun too much, but I'm pretty sure that Queen of Hearts wasn't really applied to Princess Di until after she died. Pretty sure. I'm gonna check that. I could be wrong. There's all this kind of like dark Princess Di sex shit happening in this. Again, before she isn't dead yet, but this is all happening in this issue. And like Ghislaine Maxwell literally leering over her shoulder. So that's why I think that of all the royal scandal stuff, it's likely to be a Prince Andrew one. And obviously that ties into the Nancy prediction that you make here too, right? So that's a fairly strong one. That's the biggest bet that we've got. So we've got Nancy, Tesco's, and other arising from this one. And we've also got royal nonsense and Glinner nonsense arriving from this one. All stuff that's likely to happen in May 2021. And again, like I say, it's stuff that's quite likely to happen in May 2021. None of these things are arising from out of the blue. They're arising from conditions which are imminent in our present moment, and which it's not a crazy prediction to say there could be a royal scandal in May 2021. The way things are going, it would kind of be weird if there wasn't a royal scandal in May 2021. But let's see, yeah. A really big theme in this issue is like funny police violence, which really isn't funny at the moment because there's a lot of like anti-police demos going on, because there's a bill going through Parliament which is literally designed to make peaceful protest illegal, as well as, oh, Jesus, as well as basically making any kind of nomadic lifestyle illegal in the UK. So basically, whether Roma or Irish travellers, they're going to be, their way of life is basically being outlawed. It's very like pre-genocidal kind of legislation that's being pushed through Parliament as part of this policing bill. And people are protesting about that in March 2021, and the police are being repulsively heavy-handed about it, and just being brutal. And and there's the Sarah Everard case. Basically, a lot of this kind of, the reason that the police are being very heavy-handed is because people were protesting against the fact that they had covered up sex crimes by a guy who has since been arrested for raping and murdering a girl. And people went, "Holy shit, dudes! We don't think that's cool." And the police have gone, rather than going, "You're right, we should take a fairly hands-off attitude to these protests," and kind of promise that we'll at least have a fucking inquiry into it. They've just started fucking breaking people's heads open because people have dared to say, maybe you guys shouldn't be raping and murdering at will. Fucking dark times, guys. So this and this episode, this issue is all about like funny police violence. So that as another prediction, but again, I think that's too easy to make as a prediction, really, because I think it's inevitable that there's going to be more fuss about police violence because of the way things are going at the moment. But let's say that, so the crime and policing bill has been somewhat kicked into the long grass by these protests, because protests work, and that's why they want to outlaw them. So the like Westminster was rushing through this legislation to make protesting illegal. They did, but then they paused it because of these protests, and I'm not sure how long that pause is going to happen. You might say they've paused it for March and April, and it will get pushed through again in May. That's a pretty good prediction. That might be what this is about. So crime bill being pushed through in May. The repressive COVID legislation, even though we've all got our vaccines now, the repressive COVID legislation, which says you're not allowed to go outdoors and mingle and protest, which is the pretext that's been used to police these demos, these obviously like harmless demos, so viciously, that was pushed through Parliament for another 6 months on a nod and a wink. Like there was no like resistance to that whatsoever, which is probably why they feel they can take their foot off the accelerator on the policing bill, because they're like, oh well, we've got 6 months of beating people up for no reason anyway. We don't have to make it law just yet. But maybe it gets pushed through again in May. Another one. Okay, so there's this very funny character in there's this very funny, horrible character in this episode of The Invisibles called Eddie Clitheroe, the Wig and Wanker. And the Wig and Wanker is just an excellent name for a guy in a comic, or just excellent. It's just a great name for a guy. The Wig and Wanker. So just a bit of fun. Let's just see if Wigan gets in the news for any reason. Okay. And the other one, I mean, God, again, this is one of those ones which is like, well, this is really a prediction because this is just happening. And so many, like I say, so many of the things happening in this issue are just alive and live as concerns in the UK at the moment. And not in the UK, but globally, but especially in the UK. All of the police violence, all of this like toxic masculinity stuff, all of these little details that I've just taken you through. This one, though. The little statue of Winston Churchill, who Mad Tom talked about a lot in issue 3 of The Invisibles, even though, or was it issue 2? Might have been issue 2. Even though, remember, he was talking about Winston Churchill, but the statue that appears in the frame is that South African New World Order guy, whose name I can't remember. The statue of Winston Churchill is there. Now that statue, the caricature of it here is fab. But that statue is already in the news all the time anyway, because it's like this symbol of like British imperialism, and whenever there's and this happened the other week, in this month, in fact, whenever there's a protest in central London now, which being the centre of the nation's power is all the time, the police kind of go and they form like a human shield around the statue of Churchill, because you don't have to hurt the statue of Churchill, because people like knocking down statues now because they realise that statues are powerful. And the police very like ostentatiously and kind of like the order goes out from New Scotland Yard that protect Winston Churchill at all costs, and basically the cops will protect the statue and beat people up. Like this statue of Winston Churchill is much more valuable to the police than people are. That's not even and that's just a happening thing. But maybe, and this is a fairly easy bet, there will be some controversy around the Winston Churchill statue in May 2021. That's another prediction that I'm making, because it pops up here for kind of no reason other than to remind you of the reference that it had 24 issues ago in this here comic book. So what's that we've got? So we've got, from this issue, we've got a noncery prediction, we've got a Tesco's prediction, and then we've got another prediction. From this issue, we've got a prediction around a royal scandal, probably, when you look at it in context with this one, probably a royal noncery scandal, having a significant eruption in May 2021. Remember, we're thinking about the 6th as well. Some kind of thing about the British Telecom Tower. Some kind of, I don't know. That's a lot. That's the longest shot, but that as well. That's going to be it. We're also thinking about the 6th as a date, or the number 6 being in play in all of these predictions somehow. Remember. So we've got a royal noncery scandal. We've got a Winston Churchill statue scandal. We've got a police brutality scandal. All of these are just safe bets. It's just weird that this comic happens to be about all of those things when that's just the headlines in London in Britain at the moment. And also Wigan. I haven't been keeping my eye on the rugby league. I don't know if Wigan are going to win the cup or whatever. I don't know if there's going to be a Northern Soul resurgence. I don't know what the Wigan connection is going to be, but let's just keep an eye out for it and just see if anything happens to or in or about Wigan in May 2021. And those are the predictions that we're going to make. Right? That's our test for how useful a predictive tool the Invisibles is. Now, if it turns out that none of those things come remotely true, which again I don't think is very likely, because all of the police brutality, the statue, the noncery, the royal scandal, all of that is very much in play at the moment. All of them very important kind of things to think about in this whole kind of reconstructing Britain thing that I'm always on about. If the Invisibles fails to predict any of that, and if none of those things happen in May 21 in a beyond the significant way. Oh, and Glinner was the other prediction for this, wasn't it? If none of that happens, then I'm still not going to get off my bullshit, but I might think of another way to use the Invisibles as a divinatory tool. Maybe some kind of cut up or something like that, right? Maybe we need to kind of think a bit less about the objectism in its current form as issues. Maybe sort of break that magic open a little bit and kind of recombine to see if we can get more kind of acuity as a predictive tool out of it. Because this is fun, right? It's just fun. It's quite chilly in here. That's it. 2 hours, almost on the dot. Good stuff. Okay, for the guys at the back, thanks ever so much for watching, by the way. There's about a dozen of you who do. Just thanks. So the predictions that we're making are a noncery scandal, a Tesco scandal, something else that appears in this issue, then Glinner, royal scandal, police violence scandal, Winston Churchill statue scandal, and Wigan. So we've got 8 predictions, which is quite a broad spread there, obviously, isn't it? So I'm definitely gonna find some cognitive bias confirmation there somewhere, aren't I? Lucky me. Okay, I need to go now. Thanks for watching. Back next month. Remember, next month we won't have had the predictions yet. It'll be the month after. But we will be on to the final episode of the kind of the big final story. So we're kind of getting very close to the end of book 1 of The Invisibles, which is exciting, isn't it? Okay, that's it. I've got to go. Lots of love. See you later.